Hello there, my name is David Kettlewell, and I've been a bike mechanic and working on bikes since I was 15. I was a manager of a bike service department at age 15. I've been into bikes my whole life and I really enjoy them. And I thought you'd get a kick out of this video. I just set up a Facebook group called Vintage Bikes, and I thought I'd do a YouTube channel called Vintage Bikes. And I'll give you a tour of this bike, moving the camera around towards the end. We're going to be talking about what you need to do when you buy an older bicycle. What kind of things will need serviced and why. I'm not going to go into how to do the servicing in this video, not much, but I'm going to just cover the arc of work that'll need to be done. Well, I think the first thing that is, going to be on your list of to-do is to select the vintage bike. This particular one is one of the cleanest bikes I ever got that's older. It's a 1986 Schwinn Traveler, and the 1980s Schwinns were really well designed and manufactured with close tolerances, and they're a lot of fun to ride and quality bikes. So that's why I kind of picked this, and I hadn't had a race type handlebar since I was a little kid. So I thought I'd give it a try to this one. So let's go over a couple things. First of all, I would suggest that you only buy a bike where everything's there. I wouldn't. You can buy these so inexpensively that are complete that it doesn't really make sense to buy them when you still got to go buy new parts. So I'd pick a bike that all the parts are there, and try to pick a bike that doesn't have a lot of surface rust on the frame, which there's plenty of them that are in nice shape. And if you know enough about bikes to make sure everything works, that's a plus too. So let's just say, for discussion's sake, that you've picked a bike and you rode it around the block or whatever, and now's the time to get into making the bike, mechanically sound and serviced properly. So what do? Well, basically, what you're going to find is that on these bikes, this is 32 years old, you'll find that the bearings in the hubs and bearings in the cog, bearings in the bottom bracket, bearings in the head tube, and bearings in the front hub are all bone dry. And when I say bone dry, I mean absolutely devoid of any grease at all, or usually any vestiges of grease. Sometimes there'll be a little waxy type material, but it's all gone. So those bearings are running on metal races with no lubrication. That needs to be dealt with real quickly. You don't really want to ride these, in that condition. If you absolutely must ride it, I would get yourself some Phil Wood Tenacious Oil, or some nice, chain lube, and get some lubrication into everything. You can turn the bike upside down, you get it into the head tube. You can usually pull the wheels off and squeeze some in to the bearings here, same here, here, and you of course can put oil, as you know, into a freewheel at its back, because there's actually a little gap between a couple of the parts in there, and you can squirt some in. You can usually use the tube on a chain lube container to get into about, I'd say, 3/4 of an inch off center line to the back. There is a crevice that you can get oil into, and you'll hear when it's okay. Of course, so what you'll want to do is you're going to have to take the bike apart on the bearings and grease them. And I use, white grease. It's performance grease. You can find them at bike shops. There's a lot of good greases out there. I don't use marine grease. I use bicycle grease, and it's quicker. Marine grease is the viscosity is a little too thick. So what you'll do is take off your front wheel, and to get this apart, you can use a crescent wrench, but you probably won't get it together with just a crescent wrench because there's a little adjusting nut there that's very slim, and it's much slimmer than a crescent wrench, so you'll need to get yourself usually a 14 is the size, or 13 millimeter wrench, but you'll take the wheel into the bike shop and fit the wrench. And say you're taking the bike apart, you can use the crescent for the outside one, but on the inside of the axle, the adjusting nut, you'll need a thin one. So that's how you do that. What you need to do to take apart a bottom bracket, this little metal thing here, or plastic thing, comes off with a dime or a quarter. I wouldn't use a screwdriver, you'll mess it up, use something bigger. It just has to be big enough to fit in the slot. This one's plastic. You pull it off, then you're going to have a nut. You can usually use a metric nut there, but they do make a wrench which is just for that, which I have. And then you'll need an extractor tool, which you screw in, and then the center section pushes this right off. So that's, to get this off, you need a tool. And you'll be taking off the crank arms on both sides and lubricating it with grease, and then resetting the bearings. This video is not on how to set bearings or how to regrease, but maybe someday I'll do that. Of course, I always lubricate all the working derailleur parts. You'll usually have to take apart the pulleys. I'll mention that on the derailleur. They'll have grease in them that's gummed up, and they'll turn so hard sometimes that the derailleur itself will kind of crunch up. So that'll need lubrication. You take them apart, and usually they'll lube up real well. You'll want to lube the freewheel again, and then of course the rear hub, and oftentimes you can do a nice job of regreasing the rear hub even if you don't take off the cog and freewheel by coming in from this side with your grease when the axle comes out. So when you open up this side over here. Up here on the stem of the seat post, you're going to want to grease that, and of course this nut here, the clamp, seat post clamp, will need lubrication. Typically you'll see that here I have gray tape which covers the fluting, because junk can go right down the frame, down into the bottom bracket. That is open in there. There is a plastic sealer around the actual bottom bracket axle itself, but I like that kept clean, so I seal it up here, and I would recommend that as a preventative maintenance. I use Mother's aluminum and chrome polish, you know, to clean up metal components that will want a little bit more polish on. I'll also use liquid lubricants, such as Phil Wood's Tenacious Oil or chain lube, into the pedals. You just hold the pedal over, pull the bike over to the side, and you can squirt some in here. You don't take these apart. They typically will not come apart. You know, to regrease them, you just have to come in from the side here and let it drain down a little bit. If you ride your bike when you first get it and you don't re-lubricate or correctly grease the parts and you run it dry, you will probably ruin the bearings and the races. Years ago, I never used to replace bearings. I'd clean them up and reuse them. But these days, often I'll replace them because they're so cheap, only $4 or $5 for the wheel. And something you don't know about that can help you is if you're working with like a headset and you're finding that it both is loose in terms of making noise, but it also is binding a little bit, that's an indication that the bearings are shot. So what you can do is you can strip out the grease, put Colgate regular toothpaste in, which is a lapping compound, put it all together, the old bearings in, turn it about 15 minutes, and that will resurface the races here. Then you take it all apart, clean it, find new bearings, put them in, and you'll find that it'll fix that. You can do an awful lot of neat things with regular toothpaste, Colgate toothpaste, which has dicalcium phosphate in it, which is a very, very fine compound and does a great job on resurfacing races. So that's a concept for you to consider as well. On this case, I did replace the water bottle cage because it was looking pretty bad. But this bike didn't get painted, didn't have to paint it, didn't have to replace any parts. It was really clean. A lot of these never really wore out. They were just left sit for a long time. The other thing you're going to find is that you'll be hearing a tink-tink sound as you ride. That's because the spokes are too loose. They will typically be off by at least a half a turn. You use a spoke wrench to first tighten the spokes, and you do one, every spoke might get a quarter of a turn, see how tight they are, and then, because the wheel has its strength from the tightness of the spokes, then you'll need to true it. So you'll be truing this wheel and truing this wheel, and that's part of the maintenance. The seat was fine here, and this is new handlebar tape. But this bike looks awfully close to new. It's named 9.5 on a 10 scale. Again, for 75 bucks, but lots of work to make it nice. And this is the original chain. Be aware of the fact that these chain rings and the cogs in that time period actually required a little bit thicker chain this way, a little fatter chain. So you want to use a vintage chain if you replace it, and mainly what you want to do is just take this one and lubricate it, and you can do a nice job cleaning it up just with a rag and applying a chain lube quite a few times and rubbing it with a rag and then continuing to apply it until it is in nice shape. Shouldn't even have to remove the chain to do that. Now, as far as the brake pads go, if they're the original pads, I would suggest to replace them. This was not original pads. This was actually a replacement set, and so they were probably replaced 10 years ago. Again, this is a 30-year-old bike, 32-year-old bike. The cables themselves, if the bike didn't sit outside, should be okay. I really love these levers. I think that's a lot of fun, and I'm also partial to the safety locks on the front wheel. I think that was a good design too. I'm very impressed with the quality that Schwinn was putting into the bikes in this time period, although I understand that the frames actually were made in Asia for many of them, and I have no problem with that at all. Anyhow, I did remove the reflectors in the front and the back. I did leave the metal bracket here and just cut it with a bench grinder and smoothed it because it does protect the rear brake. I didn't want reflectors. I have a lighting system I use. It's a safety system. I don't need the reflectors. It's a huge lighting system. And I did replace the tubes. And also the rim strips, which, as you know, go underneath the tube on the rim to keep the tube from being punctured by the heads of the spokes. You always want to use a spoke wrench, a park spoke wrench, for retruing your wheels, and you can see videos online on how to do that. But I think that that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say about what to do. I did get new tires. These are Continental, let's see, Ultra Sport 2, high pressure, 120 pound peak PSI tires, or 115. The spec is different places, but I replaced the rubber with these. The old rubber, you can ride them, but they get very stiff, that old rubber, and I don't. The new tires run a lot better. You know, they just grip better. So this tire I think was about $15.96 from BikeTiresDirect.com. So you can buy them very inexpensively there. So I think it's a good idea. You know, get yourself a thing. So I told you I'd give you a close-up tour of the bike. Let's take the camera over here and do that, as I promised. That'll be the end of this video. So here we go. We're going to go take a peek. And you can see here's the beautiful crank. Very, very, very clean machine. Very meticulously cleaned up. And come to here. And that was, of course, those hubs are cleaned kind of with a chrome and mag polish. And the rims just kind of wiped down. Come over here, see the front derailleur coming up here, shifters. Again, it's a beautiful example of 1986 Schwinn Traveler. These are one of my favorite older bikes. Super cool. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it can make it easy for you to get started on enjoying vintage bikes. Be sure to come on over and join this channel, Vintage Bikes, and then on Facebook it's a new group, Vintage Bikes, and be a lot more information to guide you on what to do with these.